Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to week number 4 in CU 101 Culinary Foundations. We are almost through conditional enrollment, so congrats on that. You guys, as a whole, are doing really well as far as that's concerned. Just as a reminder, remember that by the end of week 4, right? We're starting week 4 today. It will be over next Tuesday, technically, but by the end of week 4, you've got to be passing this class to continue in the program. And I want to keep seeing all your smiling faces in those sharp chef coats, looking very nice. So let's make sure that we're getting that done. If you are wondering if you are in danger of conditional enrollment coming down upon you, if you haven't heard from me about it, then you're okay. All right? If you hear from me about it, though, let's get some work done. All right? So if I haven't reached out to you specifically about conditional enrollment, then you're fine. So don't sweat it. But that doesn't mean everybody's completely in the clear, because remember, we only have 4 assignments, 2 discussion forums, and 4 knowledge checks. So everything has a lot of weight right now. So you've got to be sure you get that week 4 knowledge check and that week 4 assignment turned in on time, okay? Let's get all the points we can get so we all make sure that we get to hang out in week number 5, okay? But we'll put that aside for now. Again, if I haven't reached out to you specifically about it, don't sweat it. Week 3, let's talk about that discussion forum real quick. Food memories. You guys, some really great food memories. I hope you really enjoyed sharing those conversations, those memories, those experiences with your classmates. I saw a lot of people like, oh my God, that reminds me of this, or that reminds me when I did that. And that's exactly what we were trying to get out of that forum, right? You know, oh, your post totally reminded me of when I used to cook with my grandmother, right? Those kind of things is exactly what we were looking for. That's what we're trying to get out of that, right? Is, you know, talking about those memories. You know, you've all got different situations, different experiences, and just sharing those can, you know, spark ideas with your classmates or spark other memories they totally forgot about. So that's a really fun one. I really enjoy reading that one and getting that, getting to see those posts. As a quick reminder, remember that your initial post is worth 8 out of 10 points. You need to reply to 2 classmates, each reply being worth 1 point to get the full 10 out of 10. Okay, so since this is our first one that you had a 2-part kind of assignment, if you guys want to jump back in there and reply to your classmates, reply to at least 2 classmates, I'll still go ahead and give you those points on the replies, okay? So if you only posted your memory and then took off, get back in there and reply to 2 classmates. On those replies, we want good, thoughtful replies. We want to avoid stuff like, that's cool, or great story, right? Talk a little bit about what you liked about the post, maybe what it reminded you of, maybe you have a shared experience, something like that, right? It's a discussion forum. So we want to try to promote discussion with our replies, okay? So make sure you go ahead and get that knocked out here in the next day or so. And then we don't have another graded discussion forum until week number 7. All right, so we'll jump into that when that comes back around. A couple things we do have though coming down the pipe. I want you to be ready and start preparing yourself. Start mentally preparing yourself for what's about to happen starting in week number 5. Okay, first, your assignments are really going to start ramping up. Right? You've noticed in the first 2 weeks, you kind of had first 3 weeks, you had 2-part assignments. Here, week number 4, you got a 3-part assignment. Week number 5, you got a 3-part assignment as well, and it goes up from there. Some weeks, we're even going to have 4-part assignments. All right? So it's absolutely crucial that you are starting your assignments early in your Escoffier week. All right? Wednesday, live session, research, knowledge check. Thursday, start planning for your assignment. Okay, in week number 5, you guys are going to be making chicken stock. All right, it's absolutely fantastic. It's a super cool thing to learn how to do. It takes 3 hours to simmer, just to simmer. All right, that's not counting the time it takes you to get all your mise en place together. That's not taking the time it takes to get it up to a simmer, right? We're making a gallon of it, so that's going to take a minute, all right? Then you got to cool it down and store it, all right? So all told, that chicken stock is about 5 hours start to finish, all right? So you got to have a good chunk of time carved out for that. But that's not all you're doing in week 5. You're also going to be making a minestrone soup, and you're going to be making a velouté sauce, but you are making your minestrone soup and velouté sauce with that chicken stock. So the chicken stock has to be done first. So now we really want to start thinking about our time management, start thinking about breaking your assignment up into multiple days, right? Make your chicken stock on Friday so that on Saturday you can make minestrone soup for lunch or dinner. And then on Sunday you can make velouté sauce to go with a nice chicken breast or something like that, right? That's in week number 5. We'll go back over that some more as that comes up. But I want you to really start thinking about it. A chef is always prepared ahead of time, all right? You're rarely thinking about what's happening right now because you thought about what's happening right now 2, 3, 4 weeks ago, okay? We need to be thinking about what's happening 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks down the road, all right? That's how you prepared when you have special events, when you have holidays that come up and stuff like that. You got to be planning ahead. So it's really important that you guys right now, focus on week 4. That's where we are right now. We got to make sure that we got week 4 on lockdown, right? But look at week 5, look at week 6, look at week 7, see what's coming up so you can be prepared. Mentally, you can be thinking about those things, but also as far as your shopping is concerned, you can go, okay, well, look, in week 5, I'm using this and this and this and this. That's all the same, so I can buy a little bit more, save a little money now, or pay a little more now to save money in multiple weeks, that kind of thing, right? Start thinking about those sorts of things. Also in week number 5, we're adding a second knowledge check each week, okay? You can have a knowledge check that goes with your reading to check on the chapters you read and the videos you watched and that kind of stuff. But we're also going to start doing what's called a conversion knowledge check. These are very short, 3 to 5, 7 question little quizzes about doing mathematic conversions, okay? Ounces to gallons, quarts to cups, that kind of stuff, all right? Don't stress it. We're going to help you figure out some ways to do that. You can absolutely use calculators, all that kind of stuff. So if you're like, I'm bad at math, don't worry about that. We're going to help you with some ideas on that, right? So don't freak out about that. It's critical, again, as a professional in the food service industry, that you are familiar with these conversions. And when you're in a professional kitchen, you can pull out your phone and use the calculator. You can look up these conversions. That's fine. I don't expect you to memorize all this stuff, right? Because you probably won't in a professional kitchen anyway. But it's important that you see them, that you know how to do them, so that you're prepared when that comes down the line as well. All right, we'll get more in depth into those next week as well. But again, I want you mentally preparing yourself that once we get through this conditional enrollment, it gets real, okay? Even more really real than we already are. So let's get ready for that. Before we start talking about week number 4 and the pressure pasta, let's talk with Chef Jackie about how week 3 looked with the old rice and beans.
Week 3 looked delicious. That's how week 3 looks. Mm-hmm. This is a great week to sort of ramp into what we are going up on and what we are getting started with, which I really like. It gets busy. And we talked about that. Week 4 pasta takes a little bit more time. Week 5 really jumps in and gets busy. But this week I liked what I saw. There was very few overcooked beans. There was very little over or undercooked rice. I know a lot of people were like, I've never done rice in the oven before. Now you know why you do rice in the oven.
Yeah.
Easy, you let it go, you hang out. It still takes just about 20 minutes. As long as you get your measurement right, your ratio right of rice to liquid, and put it in the oven, it's very hard to get it wrong. Mm-hmm. Have a little bit of window and wiggle room before it's overdone and mushy or burnt. So that's why I always do my rice in the oven. Beans looked good. Make sure you're soaking them. I don't think anybody, and you don't tell me if you did, I saw a lot of soaking beans. It might have been the morning of, and then you went to work and you came home and cooked. At least they got some soak time. It's pretty clear, and you'll see in production, if you didn't soak before now, you're probably going to. And if you've never not soaked, or if you've never done beans and you want to try them from dry, go ahead. But you will see very quickly how much faster it is to go from a soaked bean and how much more consistently those beans cook.
Yeah. It really cuts the time like in half.
Yeah. And the one thing you do want to be careful of on that bean, on those beans, you really want it to simmer. You don't want to boil. That if your beans started to pop open, there's a good chance I made a mention in your simmering bean photo that your beans might have been boiling. Just little baby bubbles coming to the surface. Beans are as hard as they are raw and dried, they're delicate. They fall apart. So you don't want to work them too hard and boil them too hard. But overall, really nice job this week.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, really, for the bean soaking, 8 to 12 hours is a great amount of time. You can go up to 16 hours. Anything more than that, then you might want to think about popping them in the fridge. Yeah, they're dried beans, but once you start to hydrate them, there can be the potential that they start to ferment or sprout, and then they might get a little funky. So you got to watch out for that. My rule of thumb always was, people say, "Hey, chef, can you smell this?" I say, "I don't play the smell game. I don't play the smell game because I don't like funky smelling stuff." I say, "Look, if you have to think about it, toss it, start over, right? If you wouldn't serve it to your mom, don't serve it to a guest, all right? That's always a good rule of thumb. If you're like, I don't know, toss it and start over. It's not worth risking, potentially getting sick or something like that. Just to save the buck. All right. Week number 4 is pasta week. I love this. It's so much fun. If you've never made fresh pasta from scratch, oh my goodness, you're in for such a treat, okay? But before we talk about pasta, we're going to talk about our sauces that we're making this week. Because if I start on pasta, I'm just going to keep talking about pasta, and then at the end I'll be like, oh yes, make sauce. So let's talk about the sauces first, so we make sure that they get their day in the sun, okay? The first sauce we're going to talk about making is the tomato sauce, all right? Now, very important to mention here, and Chef Jackie will remind you again in a little while, this is not marinara sauce, okay? This is not, if you're used to, the Prego or the Ragu and this is not going to taste like that. This is not going to taste like the tomato sauce you get when you go, to your favorite Italian joint and you order that spaghetti with red sauce. This is not that tomato sauce, okay? So when you go to taste this, don't go, that doesn't taste like spaghetti sauce, because it's not supposed to taste like spaghetti sauce, okay? This is the classic French mother sauce tomato sauce, okay? You may or may not be familiar with the 5 mother sauces by Escoffier, right? There's the tomato sauce, there's the bechamel, there's the velouté, there's the sauce espagnole, and then there's the hollandaise. We're going to make several of these in this class. You're going to do the tomato sauce, you're going to do the velouté sauce, and then you're going to make hollandaise sauce in your next class. Bechamel is something that you'll have the opportunity to do at some point in this class. And then the espagnole is just a variation on the velouté. We'll talk about that next week when we make that. This week we're talking about the tomato sauce, the sauce tomate. All right. In this particular case, all these sauces will teach you some sort of lesson in thickening, right? It's kind of it's interesting if you really step back and you go, well, what do all 5 of those sauces have in common? There's a thickening agent of some sort in each of those. Okay. In this case, the thickening agent is not so much an agent as it is a technique, and that technique is reduction. All right, that's how we're going to thicken the sauce, by reduction and by pureeing the ingredients in it. All right. So this tomato sauce, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the recipe. It's pretty straightforward when you get to the actual process. There's a couple of tips that we have for you to help ensure success. But first, what we want to talk about is right up here. This is a sticking point a lot of times. It starts with salt pork or bacon. You can also start with pancetta or pork belly. Any of those are fine. Now, if you don't consume pork for dietary or other reasons, you absolutely do not have to put pork in this. You can just start with some olive oil, okay? And that's totally fine. It's gonna still be absolutely delicious, all right? The technique is exactly the same. It's just gonna have a slightly different flavor. That's it, all right? Because what we're using the pork for, it's gonna give us some flavor for sure, but the main reason we're using this pork is for its fat, okay? You guys are gonna hear me and Chef Jackie a lot in this class refer to fat. You need to start with some fat. You got too much fat. There's not enough fat. You need to. When we say fat, we're not talking about like we're not referring to like saturated fat like you hear about when you talk about diets and stuff like that. When we say fat, we're talking about cooking mediums. Okay, we're talking about butter. We're talking about oil, various kinds of oil. We're talking about various kinds of animal fat. Right, that's what we're talking about. And we use those fats. For a lot of different reasons, right? We use those fats to help keep things from sticking. We use those to help thicken things. We use those for flavor, right? So it's important not to automatically assume that fat is a bad thing, okay? In fact, every chef I know carries the mantra, fat is flavor, okay? Fat is flavor. It adds mouthfeel, it adds texture, it adds flavor, it's delicious. What's important to note is that when we're talking about fat, we're always using fat in moderation, all right? When we're talking about these butters, these oils, these fats, we're using it in moderation. It's totally fine to consume in moderation, okay? And we'll continue to talk about that as we hit it in a few different weeks. But what we're using this pork product for is the fat. So that first word there, render, that's something not everybody's familiar with. And what that means is to extract and melt the fat out of that pork product. So you've noticed when you made bacon before, right? You slap that bacon in a dry pan, and when you're done cooking the bacon, there's a bunch of liquid in there, right? That's the fat that has rendered out. That animal fat, when it's heated up, will actually melt and turn it and liquefy. Right? And that becomes that grease, right? We like to say fat because it sounds a lot nicer than grease. So what we're going to do is render out your pork product. If you're not using pork, a little bit of oil, same thing. It's going to give us the same start, right? We're going to throw in some onion and some carrots, and we're going to saute that until slightly softened, not browned. In goes your tomatoes. Here we're asking you for canned crushed tomatoes. We get a lot of people will ask us about using fresh tomatoes, especially here at the end of the summer. You got a garden full, you're trying to get rid of them. I get it. Here's the thing though. When we're using canned tomatoes, and you'll see this a lot in a few recipes that we do throughout this class, the thing about canned tomatoes is that they've already been cooked down, right? Generally, they've been peeled, they've been de-seeded, and they've been cooked down. Tomatoes have a great deal of water in them, okay? So if you're trying to use fresh tomatoes in a recipe like this, what's gonna happen is a few things. First, you gotta peel them and seed them because we don't want the peels and the seeds in this thing. But second, if you just use a peeled and seeded tomato, it's still got a lot of water content. So you're not gonna get a really deep, rich tomato flavor. You're also not going to get a deep, rich red color, okay? Because of that water content that's in that tomato, you're gonna end up with a pink or maybe even orange tomato sauce, and it's just not gonna look as good. It's also just not gonna have that deep, deep flavor, all right? So we want canned crushed tomatoes, all right? That's what we're looking for in this particular recipe. So you got your onions and your carrots sauteed. They're starting to soften up and get translucent. In goes your tomatoes, and then we're going to add in the sachet. Typically speaking, technically speaking, classically speaking, you would take all of these ingredients that are listed under sachet and wrap them up in a little bit of cheesecloth, okay? And that's what the sachet is, right? It's a little pouch that you would put these things in, all right? You'll see that a few more times as we move forward, and we'll talk about it each time we see it. In this particular case, if you do not already have cheesecloth at home, don't worry about it, all right? This thing is going to get strained and pureed, So you can just throw all these ingredients in there and it'll be fine. If you have cheesecloth at home already and you want to put these things into a little cheesecloth pouch and tie it up, you absolutely can do that, and that's fine. But don't break your back running all over town trying to find cheesecloth. Okay? You can just throw these ingredients right in there. Garlic clove, peppercorns, thyme, and rosemary are optional, but I highly recommend them if you have them. Fresh or dry is fine on those. What we do want to avoid is the ground thyme and the ground rosemary. Those can alter the color of your product. But the dried rosemary leaves or dried thyme leaves, those are fine. Or you can use whole sprigs of thyme and rosemary as well if you have fresh herbs available. Okay? And then a pinch of salt and a pinch of sugar is what's going to get added to those as well. Okay? We really like this whole fresh garlic clove because we don't want this to be garlicky. Okay? So we'd rather not use garlic powder. We'd rather not use pre-minced garlic in this or any kind of garlic paste because we don't want it to be garlic-y. We just want that subtle hint of garlic. So if you take a whole clove of garlic and drop it in there, this thing's going to simmer for an hour and a half to 2 hours. It will get a little bit of that garlic flavor in there and it'll be subtle. And that's what we want. Again, that's why this doesn't taste like a spaghetti sauce, right? It's not garlicky. All right. Whole peppercorns are great. Crushed. If you've got a pepper grinder and you just want to turn a couple cranks of pepper in there, that's totally fine as well. Okay. Again, it's not going to be peppery. It's not going to make it spicy. It's just going to add some layers and some depth of flavor. All right. Saute your onions and your carrots. In goes your tomatoes. In goes your sachet ingredients. You're going to bring it up to a boil, then immediately down to a simmer. Okay. And I mean, as soon as you see that first boop, right, drop that sucker down to low. All right. Because we talked about the water content of tomatoes, but what tomatoes also have is a relatively high sugar content. Okay. Which means they will burn if we're not paying attention. Okay, that's why we want a very low simmer and we want to be stirring these constantly. At my house and at the kitchens I used to run, we played what I call the stir game. That's where you leave a high temperature spatula or a wooden spoon in that pot and you tell everybody, hey, every time you walk by here, give this a little bit of a stir because we don't want these tomatoes burning on the bottom of this pan, okay? Once those tomatoes scorch and burn on the bottom, the whole thing is trash. There's no way to just scrape the top pieces off and I just left the burnt part in the bottom of the pan. No. Once that scorches on the bottom, the whole thing is going to taste like scorch and burn and it's not good. All right. So it's critical that we turn that heat down. All right. Once you've got it a nice consistency, you've got that hour and a half, then it's time to puree this thing. All right. There are 3 acceptable methods of pureeing. Okay, first is to pass this through a food mill. Okay, a food mill is a piece of equipment. It kind of looks like a big funnel. In the bottom, it's got interchangeable plates that have holes in them, and then there's a crank in there. So you put the food in there over a bowl or a pot. You turn the crank, and the crank pushes the food through the holes. So anything that can be pushed through the hole gets pushed through it. We really like the food mill because it gives a really nice texture. Okay, it almost leaves little chunks in there, but they're an appropriate size chunk to give it some texture, and it's really nice. Okay, now food mills can be a little hard to come by. You might stumble on one at Target or Walmart or something. You can absolutely order them online. Maybe check your local restaurant supply store. They may have one available as well. If a food mill is not, you're like, this will be the one time I'll ever use this. We have another opportunity to use it later in this class. That may be the only 2 times you ever use it, and that may be an expense you don't want to incur, and that's totally fine because we have a couple other options. Another option is to just push it straight through a strainer. Okay, this is the one I do at home. I've got a nice wire mesh strainer that I use, to strain, simmered or boiled foods, whatever. Take that strainer, put it over a bowl or a pot, pour your tomato sauce in there, and then use a spatula and just push through whatever you can push through. And it's the exact same effect as the food mill, right? We're going to push through whatever fits through those holes. We're going to end up with a really nice texture. It's not going to be like thin and pourable. Once you mix it all together, it's going to be pretty thick. And that's what we want. That's what we're looking for. Okay. The third option for pureeing your sauce is to use an immersion blender. All right. This is a stick blender, right? It's got a motor thing with a button, and then there's a stick, and there's a little blade on the end, right? You know, if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about, right? The two unacceptable methods for pureeing your sauce are a regular stand-up blender, like a milkshake blender, and a food processor. Those are not acceptable ways to puree your tomato sauce. Why, you ask? Well, that's because they puree at such a high RPM that they're going to add a lot of air to your sauce, which will A, change the color, B, it's going to make it too thin, right? It's going to puree it too fine. We want some texture in there. Excuse me. And that's what we're trying to avoid. We want that thicker texture. We don't want that air whipped in there, because when you whip that air into your sauce, it's going to make it like an orange color. All right. So the strainer is, probably the go-to for most of you guys, and that's totally fine. Like I said, that's what I use to make my tomato sauce when I make this style of tomato sauce. All right. Absolutely doable. A little bit of elbow grease, pushing that stuff through there, and you're going to end up with some stuff in the strainer, right? The peppercorns aren't going to push through the strainer, right? You may smash the garlic clove, but you may end up with a little bit of garlic left in there. That's fine. You may not get all the carrots through there. That's fine, right? Push as much of it as you can through the strainer, and you have a nice texture.
Okay. Couple questions that came up in the chat while Chef Luke was going through all of this. Sachet, if you don't have a coffee filter, you can't find cheesecloth, you don't need to use it. And it came up, the video doesn't use a sachet. Correct. You don't have to. Put it in. You still need to put the ingredients in. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to use an immersion blender, you need to fish out those peppercorns. You need to fish out some of those ingredients before you blend. The food mill and the colander, it should catch them. So if you're not using an immersion blender, then don't worry about it. It's one less step. It is a classic technique. That's why we incorporate it. You'll see it again when we talk about stock. It was in last week in the rice, beans, in the white beans.
White beans.
In the white beans. So that's why we talk about it. You will see it. You will have chefs probably in the industry that say, go make me a sachet for the stock. And it's beneficial to know what that is. If you don't have a food mill, again, strainer, hand mixer, or hand blender, but plan ahead, do that. But one thing you do have to puree it somehow. No stand mixer, or no stand blender, no stand mixer, it won't do anything, and no food processor. But it has to be blended. That's what makes it the sauce. That's what finishes it.
Yeah, that's the technique, is making a pureed sauce.
Somebody asked about making, and we haven't talked Alfredo yet. We'll get there, but no, it's not a bechamel that has cheese in it. That's not the technique. So it came up. I'm just gonna mention it now. And no, when you taste this, it's not going to taste like grandma's. If you're Italian, it doesn't taste like grandma's Sunday spaghetti sauce. It's not Italian gravy. This is not what we're going for. It tastes very different. The first time I made this in culinary school, I hated it. Because in my head, tomato sauce has basil, oregano, no carrots, all these other flavors. That's not what we're making. When you think about what this is, it's delicious. It's amazing, but it's not what most of you think of when you hear tomato sauce. So scrub that sort of from your brain a little bit. When you go to taste it with an open mind, because it is different.
Yeah, this sauce is actually what's also sometimes referred to as a leading sauce, because it becomes other sauces, right? So this is a sauce that can become, there's a Spanish paprika sauce, the name escapes me, but it's basically this tomato sauce plus a lot of paprika and some saffron and some other stuff, right? This can also become a Creole sauce, right? If you add celery, onion, bell pepper, and okra and cook some shrimp in this, It's delicious, right? So it becomes a lot of other sauces, and that's why you may taste this and go, man, this needs a bunch of oregano and basil and more garlic. And okay, well, if you make this sauce and then you want to turn it into a marinara sauce, sure, you can do that. You can flavor it like a marinara sauce. That's the beauty of these mother sauces, is that they are a base sauce that you can then turn into. They're all delicious on their own, but then you can turn them into other things by adding other things to them. That's why they're called mother sauces. Okay. The Alfredo sauce. Let's jump straight into this. This sauce we're learning. This comes together, y'all, in about like 5 minutes. All right. So you gotta be ready to rock and roll on this one. It's quick, fast, in a hurry. This sauce is thickened by reduction. Okay, and the addition of cheese, which is delicious. Let's look at this one real fast. Let me grab Kenny. Kenny, you got a question? You might have to unmute yourself there, sir.
There we go.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I've got an immersion blender at work.
Mm-hmm.
After I do the sauce, do I want to run it through like a triple screen filter and just put it into a separate pot, or just like a once through the strainer after I blend it?
No, so if you're using the immersion blender, like Chef Jackie said, if you've got whole peppercorns in there, you want to try to strain those out a little bit. But for the most part, you can just immersion blend it and then not strain it. We want it to have that texture. We want it to have some texture.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Great question.
This tomato sauce should not be the consistency and texture of like a tomato juice. It's not that thin. It's got some body. It'll look similar to that Prego or that marinara you're used to, but it's not going to taste the same. You don't want it that thin. There's still some stuff in there. It's just smoothed out a little bit.
It should be thicker than like tomato soup.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. All right, cool. Let's talk Alfredo sauce. This one comes together super quick and super easy. It's got just a very few ingredients. This one's pretty straightforward, but let's walk through it real fast. So we're gonna start out with some butter, just good old regular whole butter. And remember from last week, when we talked butter, we are talking whole, unsalted, real butter, right? No margarine, no salted butter. We're talking real, unsalted, whole butter when we talk about butter. So you're going to melt some butter in a pan. You're going to add a garlic clove, okay? A whole garlic clove. If you want to smash it a little bit with your knife, you can do that. We do not want to chop this garlic. We do not want to use minced garlic. We do not want to use garlic powder. Again, we want this to have a hint of garlic. Some would say a rumor of garlic, a soupçon of garlic, if you will. We just want, you want to taste it and go, is there a little garlic in there? Right, that's how much garlic you want to have in there. It's not a garlic sauce, okay? Also, we want to use this whole clove of garlic because this one cooks so quickly that if you were to throw in chopped garlic, the chopped garlic would not get cooked, and you would have crunchy pieces of raw garlic in your sauce, okay? And that's going to ruin date night. So we don't want that to happen, all right? We want that whole clove, so we get a little garlic kind of on the back end there is what we want. Throw that garlic in there, in that melted butter, and as soon as you can smell it, right, in goes the cream, all right? We just want to start, we want to scent the butter with garlic, and then in goes the cream. We're going to stir this, keep it stirring and moving. I like to do figure eights and watch the trails behind the spatula when stirring an Alfredo sauce. This goes together real quickly, okay? You're going to bring it up to a boil, then quickly down to a simmer, because if this boils over all over your stove, you've got a real mess, all right? So you got to be careful. We like to do this in, like it says, in a shallow pan. A skillet is a perfect option for this, okay? Also, by spreading out that cream on a larger surface area, we can reduce it faster, okay? So when we say reduce, what that means is we are cooking the water out of it, okay? The heavy cream is water and fat, right? And, milk solids, all right? We want to get the water out of that. So every time you are cooking, anything in a pot, in a pan, and it bubbles and that bubble pops and you see steam come out, right? That is water going from a liquid state to a gas state and escaping whatever it is you're boiling. Okay? The water will keep going out. The fat, the milk solids, the flavor, that will all stay in. And that's how things get thicker when you cook them on the stove. We're cooking the water out. So a little trick, if you ever like super over reduce something and it's not burnt, but it's just over reduced, you put a little bit of water back in there and get back to where you want to be. All right. That's not something I would recommend this week with your heavy cream because, you know, it's mostly fat and milk solids. But what we want to do is just bubble that until it thickens, right? So once you have what's called a nappe consistency, let me pull up my favorite picture of nappe consistency so you know what that means. That's again, another fancy French culinary term. And what that means is sauce consistency. All right. Where's my favorite picture? Here we go. This is not my favorite, but we'll get the point across.
Are you looking for the nappe picture, Chef?
Yep, right there.
My favorite picture. This is what I like to see pretty much every week from here on out.
You're going to be making sauces a bunch, okay? And every one of your sauces should have this consistency. If you dip a spoon in the sauce, and then on the back of the spoon, you run your finger through that line you made with your finger should hold. See how that line is holding and that sauce isn't running back together? That's nappe consistency. That's what we're looking for on all our sauces, all right? And you want to make sure and hit that E with that hard French A sound, so you're not saying nappy consistency, because that's not what we want. Nappe consistency, right? On your sauce. Nice and thick, right? That's that what you want in a sauce. You want that mouth feel. You want it to coat your tongue, right? That's how that sauce works, right? When you get that nice sauce consistency. So as soon as you get that sauce consistency, take that garlic clove out with a spoon or some tongs or something. Don't stick your fingers in there. I know it's not because it's hot, because we don't want your fingers in the sauce. All right. And then we are going to add Parmesan cheese. Here's my Parmesan cheese soapbox. If you've got one of those jars of the shaker cheese in your fridge, that is perfect for pizza.
And that's it.
That's it. All right. That is not the Parmesan cheese we're talking about. We're also not talking about buying pre-shredded Parmesan cheese. Okay. Here's the thing. Those two particular items have anti-caking agents around them, some form of cornstarch type product.
Or worse.
Or worse, yeah. And the point of that is to keep all that from clumping together, from sticking together. And it achieves that purpose, and that's great for that purpose. But what that does is prevents that cheese from melting silky smooth. All right? Because that caking agent is on there, those cheeses will not melt very well, and you get a little gritty in your sauce, okay? And when you try to melt those cheeses in there. So anytime you're trying to melt a cheese into something, into a sauce, right? You know, those pre-shredded cheeses, maybe like on a pizza or something, that's fine, because it's okay to see those shreds and it's going to melt fine. But when we're trying to melt it into a sauce and we want it to be silky smooth and pure, we want to shred the cheese ourselves so that there's none of that caking agent in there. All right. So go to the cheese section and get yourself a wedge of Parmesan Reggiano. You could use, my personal favorite is Grana Padano. I like that. Asiago is going to work just fine. Any of those hard Italian wedges of cheese are what we want to have. Okay. And you're going to grate that cheese in there yourself. Okay. And that's how it's going to melt and be just silky smooth. And we're going to use that cheese again next week in our minestrone soup. So you're going to get some value out of it. This cheese, if you keep it wrapped up, is going to stay in your fridge just fine for a month or two at least. It's already 18 months old. So you got some time to get it used. It does not last that long in my house. We grate cheese on anything we can because it's delicious. All right. So go ahead and get that wedge because not only because it's the best quality product, right? We want to be buying foods as whole as we can. All right. So, you know, buying it in that shape allows you to be able to do a lot more things with it than if you buy it already shredded, right? So, and that's the case with as much as we can. Buy it as whole as possible. That way the options, a lot more options. Just like when we're talking about buying that whole chicken, right? You get a lot more options with a whole chicken than you do if you just buy chicken breasts, right? Same thing. If we buy that wedge of cheese, we got a lot more options than if we buy pre-shredded or crumbled cheese, all right? You get that sauce reduced, you grate that cheese in there, then we want to taste it before you add any salt because that cheese is going to have a lot of salt in it already, okay? So you may be able to flavor your Alfredo sauce just with salt, or just with cheese, excuse me, just with cheese, all right? Taste it after the cheese is in there, then maybe you want to throw in a pinch of cheese, or a pinch of salt and some cracker pepper, all right?
Chef.
And that's fast and easy.
Sorry,
Yes.
I want to, the question, because on the recipe it's 3 ounces of cheese. Anytime you see ounces written on a recipe, we're talking weight. We're not talking by volume. We are always talking by weight. If it says a half a cup, then we're talking volume. So just keep, and yes, I understand you may not have a scale yet. So things like for your Alfredo, 3 ounces by weight, you can do for this one, you can go by taste. It should be cheesy. It has a substantial amount in there. It should taste like Alfredo sauce. But as we get moving, you do get a scale in your second kit, unless it has changed. I don't believe it has. So when you see ounces, we're talking, unless it's, you know, water, and it does weigh the same volume and weight, but for water only, let me not confuse anyone. We are talking weight. So
Yeah, it's also important. We're really going to get into this at this point. When you're doing things like sauces and soups and those sort of things, the recipe is really a guideline, not a hard and fast rule. You're going to learn a lot as you're cooking, and you probably know this just from cooking at home, right? Sometimes you need an extra pinch of this or a little less of that, or you need to throw one more of these than it says in the recipe, right? And that's totally fine. That's totally fine. We're concerned with the technique, okay? We're not gonna, you know, we're not making you show us all this stuff, you know, on the scale, right? We want to see it all measured out and ready to go. That's your mise en place, right? You've got it already weighed out or measured out or whatever. If you're this way or that way, a little bit on the weight, it's not going to affect the technique, okay? When we start getting into doughs, like a pasta, or when you start doing pastries, then it's science, then that stuff's got to be on the money, okay? But when we're talking about soups and sauces and stuff like that, a little bit this way or that, and you're going to be okay, all right? I also want to take a quick minute to remind you guys, if you find yourself looking at a recipe and you go, oh man, I'm missing something off of there, shoot me and Chef Jackie a note, okay? And we can let you know if that particular item is critical to the technique for that assignment, okay? Or if we can give you a substitution if you need a substitution, all right? Don't wait to send me a note when you're at the store, because if I'm not on my computer or something, I may not be able to get to you right then, right? Send those notes before you go to the store and that kind of stuff, all right? And before you say, you know, shoot me a note on, you know, if I send you a message Wednesday, hey, what happened to your assignment? You go, oh, I didn't have garlic to make my Alfredo sauce. I'm going to say, well, why didn't you send me a note? You know, I could have told you something else you could have used or something you could have left out and you could have got it in on time. All right. So if you're stressing about that kind of stuff, okay, send us a note. Don't send me a note on Tuesday. Okay. Tuesday, it's too late. Send me a note before then and we can help you get it figured out. All right. Let's talk pasta. The star of the show, the reason you're all here. Again, I'm so very excited for you guys to get to do this. It is hard work, okay? I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Not easy, but very few things in life that are easy are really worth doing, okay? This isn't some hard work, and it really pays off. If you take the time, you do it, you really do it correctly. I want to look at the recipe first real fast. because there's something important I want to note here. If you do have a scale or can get a scale, right? You can pick them up at like Walmart in the gadget aisle. You can order them online. Places like Target, sometimes your grocery store might have them. If you can get a scale, I really like a scale this week to measure out your flour. Because here's the thing. If I ask William and Daniel and Ashley all to go get me a cup and a half of flour, they're all going to be a little bit different, right? Like William may have his like leveled off, but it's kind of loose in there, right? And then Daniel's is leveled off, but it's packed in real tight, right? And then Ashley's is maybe scooped up and mounded, right? But they all brought me a cup and a half, right? By their definition of a cup and a half, but it's all a little bit different. But if I ask William and Daniel and Ashley to bring me 180 grams of flour, they're all going to bring me 180 grams of flour, right? That's why when you guys get into your pastry class, you'll see they want to weigh a lot of stuff out, because weight is always the same and always exact. Volume is always a little bit like this, all right? So if you can, and I'm not saying, don't do this if you don't have a scale. I'm not saying go spend money you don't have, anything like that. You can absolutely be successful by measuring out a cup and a half of flour on this, okay? But if you got the scale, use the scale, all right? Because 180 grams is always 180 grams. So that's the thing I like to point out, is the weight option on this one. I do have students will message me, I did the cup and a half and my dough is dry. I did the cup and a half and my dough is wet. I've never had anybody message me and say I measured out 180 grams of flour and my dough is off. It's on every single time. All right. Also, as far as the recipe goes this week, if you're tight on cash, this is one that can absolutely be scaled down. If you want to do 90 grams of flour and 1 egg, you can make this pasta dough out of 90 grams of flour and 1 egg. I've done it successfully, and it makes enough pasta for 2 people to have, a nice little portion of pasta. Okay. If you need to scale up, you can scale up and make more. It's 90 grams of flour per egg that you use. Okay. And then the salt and the salt and olive oil is always just a little salt and a little olive oil. All right. We didn't give you a measurement on that. All right. So this one's scalable. Making the pasta dough. You absolutely must do this by hand. No, you cannot put this in a food processor. No, you cannot put this in a stand mixer. You need to get your hands dirty, and you need to make this dough by hand. Absolutely. I prefer to do it straight on a countertop because it's more fun. It's more fun. Get your countertop sanitized and dry, right? And then just put that flour right on the countertop, make a little well in the middle, mix your eggs, pour that in, pinch of salt, couple of drops of olive oil, and start mixing that dough right on the countertop. It's so much fun. Once you get this down, so much fun to do with the kiddos around. They love it. They love getting their hands dirty, right, and making that dough and mixing it up. It's great. For you, it's cheap labor down the road. But if you're like, oh, the mess, right, and it gives you like the heebie-jeebies, you can mix it in a bowl. Okay. I like the countertop. I think it's more fun. It's more authentic to do it on the countertop. But that's the process, right? You make a well of flour, either on the countertop or in a bowl. Take your eggs, go ahead and beat them together. You'll notice in my video, I did not beat the eggs together, right? And I had a bit of a time trying to keep it all in the well. So if you beat the eggs together and pour them in the middle, they mix in a little bit better. Literally a pinch of salt and like a couple of drops of olive oil. If you don't have olive oil, canola oil is fine. And I mean, it's literally like 3 or 4 drops of oil. Okay. And then you're going to start mixing, right? You put your fingers into that egg and start mixing it. And as you're mixing the egg, use your other hand to bring a little flour in, bring a little flour in, bring a little flour in, bring a little flour in. And it starts to come together. Then you can get both hands in there and really start it coming together. And it'll start getting kind of what they call a shaggy mass, right? And that's when there's no longer egg and flour. It's a dough, right? We'll keep mixing it together, and it's going to keep coming together, and it's going to keep coming together, and it's going to keep coming together. And eventually you're going to have, you know, a dough ball where it's not all broken apart. It's going to stick to your fingers, so you're constantly going to want to be pulling all that stuff off your fingers and incorporating that into your dough ball all the time until you have a good solid dough ball. All right. Now, once it's all come together and it's a dough ball, if it's kind of dry and cracky, take a little bit of water on the side, like in a bowl or something, and like, you know, like you're messing with your brother and you're flicking water at him, right? It's that kind of, it's literally flicks of water, because you'll be surprised how much that water will hydrate that flour. Now, if you get it all mixed together and it's kind of still sticky and loose, flour, little flicks of flour, okay? And again, you'll be surprised how that will come together. Just a little bit of flour will be what you need, okay? That cup and a half is going to be real close, okay? The 100, like I said, the 180 grams is usually on the money, and your dough ball's good. Once that dough ball's come together, we're at an extremely critical point in our dough making process, all right? And that is the kneading process. You must knead this dough for 15 minutes by hand, okay? Yes, it's exhausting. It's very tiring. It's hard work, but you got to do it. Because what we're doing in this kneading process is we are developing the gluten that is in the flour, okay? And I know gluten's like an evil word now, but it's critical in the success of a really good pasta, okay? This point of kneading the pasta and developing that gluten is what's going to determine the texture of your finished pasta, okay? So it's critical that you knead it really well, okay? And you'll see in the video, I like to press that dough ball kind of into a disc, then fold it on itself, and then press that down. And it makes kind of another disc. Then I'll rotate it 90 degrees, flip it on it, fold it on itself, press down. Rotate 90 degrees, fold it on itself, press down. Roll it on it, you know, and rotate, press, rotate, press, rotate, flip, press, right? And you just do that over and over again. And then eventually you switch to the left side, then you switch back to the right side, then you switch back to the left side, right? If you can do this on like on a kitchen countertop, or maybe even on a kitchen table, where you don't want your arms up here, right? You're gonna get a lot tired faster like that. If you can get it down like at your waist, where you're pushing down, you know, and you're not having to lift your shoulders, it's a little more comfortable. You're still gonna get tired and it's still hard work, but it's a little more comfortable if you wanna do it at the kitchen table instead of the counter. That's fine, okay? But 15 minutes is how long it takes to do this, absolutely. After that, now we're at the second most critical point of the pasta making process, and that's the resting, all right? You're gonna take that dough ball, you're gonna wrap it in some saran wrap, and you're gonna set it on the countertop for at minimum 30 minutes, okay? Think about how you feel after going to the gym, after working out. What do you wanna do? You wanna rest. You wanna relax. You wanna hydrate. And that's what your dough wants to do, right? We developed all that gluten and we really got it working and working and working and working and working. Now it wants to rest and relax. It wants to redistribute that liquid from the egg, from the oil. It wants to hydrate that flour, and that's how it becomes a nice smooth dough, okay? It needs to relax. It's real tight, and we need it to relax. Because after it's rested, we're gonna try to roll it out. And if it's too tight and you go to roll it out, it's gonna tighten back up again. It will literally, you will push it with a rolling pin and it will shrink back up if it's not well rested enough, okay? So 30 minutes to an hour on the countertop is what we want to rest that at. Now, if you absolutely cannot do this whole process from start to finish, and you absolutely have to, you know, do the dough today and make the pasta tomorrow, you can wrap it real tight in saran wrap and refrigerate it, but no longer than 1 day, okay? You'll even notice that at 24 hours, it's gonna start to get kind of almost like start to gray kind of and oxidize. It's still fine at that point. The color's not as beautiful as it was 24 hours ago, but you're still okay. Any longer than 24 hours, you gotta toss it and start over, okay? But that's the maximum for delaying the process. All right, once you've got your dough ball, once it's rested, now we're gonna split into two camps, okay? We've got pasta machine, no pasta machine, all right? So let's talk to the no pasta machine people first. If you can find a pasta machine, if you already have one, right? I'm talking about the crank and the cutter, or if you have the KitchenAid attachment. If you want to go out and get one of those, or you've already got it, you're absolutely welcome to use it. We'll talk about how to use that in a minute. If you don't have it and you don't want to go get one, that's totally fine. You'll see in the video, I made it by hand. It is absolutely possible to make fresh pasta by hand. In fact, that's how most people still do it. That's how a lot of people prefer to do it. Chef Jackie, I know she prefers.
My favorite way.
Yeah, it's cathartic.
It's very much.
The process is, okay? So you got your dough ball. It's been rested. Unwrap it. Cut it in half, all right? If you're doing that 180 grams or that cup and a half of flour, go ahead and cut that in half, that dough ball in half. It's going to be a little easier to work with when you split it, okay? We're going to flour our countertop real good. And people always, Chef, how do you fling that flour, right? You remember skipping rocks when you were a kid on the lake, right? You got that sidearm kind of flick. That's how you fling that flour like that. A little bit in your hands. Nice light coating of flour. You want to have more flour sitting off to the side because you're going to need to continue to flour as you go. All right. Excuse me. Get your dough ball out there. Get it nice and floured as well. If you're using a rolling pin, get that nice and floured as well. If you don't have a rolling pin, you can use any cylinder, right? A wine bottle works great. I know a lot of people make pasta with wine bottles all the time. And that's fine. Any kind of cylinder that you have that's safe for food that you can get a little flour on is going to work to roll this thing out. Okay? Flour everything. Press your dough disc down a little bit so start with a nice flat piece of dough, right? And then start rolling. Okay? What's important though is that as you roll, every couple of rolls, pick up your dough disc, or now it's starting to be a dough sheet, right? Get a little more flour underneath it, get a little more flour on top of it, flip it over, rotate it, flip it, rotate it. Keep it moving, okay? You constantly want to be moving this dough sheet, because if you just slap it on the counter and then roll it out into a big dough sheet, you've got a big, beautiful, thin sheet of dough stuck to your countertop, and you're not going to be able to use it, all right? So we want to make sure we keep moving it. You'll see in the video, I keep moving that dough sheet constantly. Keep throwing flour on the counter. Keep throwing flour on your rolling pin. Keep throwing flour on your dough sheet. Constantly moving it until we have it the thickness we want it to be. All right? The ideal thickness for the pasta we're making this week, we're making fettuccine. Okay, so we're going to be making a nice long noodle. The ideal thickness is when you pick up your dough sheet with your two hands, you can almost see your hands. Right? It's not see-through, right? I can't see the light through it, but when I pick it up, you can almost see my hands, right? It'll drape real nice between your fingers and everything. That's what we're looking for. Okay, nice and thin, okay? If you don't get it thin enough, it won't cook properly. So you want to make sure that you get it thin enough, okay? Once you've got that nice and rolled out, again, flour it one more time, and then fold it like a letter, okay? You know, it's like a sheet shape now, and then fold it down on itself like a letter. And that's going to help us cut those pieces. Then you can use your knife right there on the countertop and cut right along that letter, and you'll have those nice strips. All right? Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Well, it's not easy. It's hard work. But the process takes some time. But it's, again, definitely worth it. So now let's talk to those pasta machine people. If you've got a pasta maker, you still want to take that dough disc and cut it in half, press it into a nice flat-ish disc. You're going to set your pasta machine on whatever the thickest setting is. Sometimes it's 0, sometimes it's 7. It depends on who made your pasta machine. Okay, but whatever the widest setting is, that's what we want to set it on. And you're going to dust that machine with flour as well. Okay, dust your dough disc with flour. Run it through on that thickest setting like 3 times, okay, just to get it nice and consistent, okay? Then we're gonna drop that roller down by 1 notch, whatever 1 notch thinner is. Run your dough sheet through. A little flour on your machine, a little flour on your dough, 1 notch. Run it through, a little flour on your machine, a little flour on your dough, 1 notch. Run it through, and you go all the way down, not to the thinnest one, but to like 2 away from that. Like the 3rd thinnest one should be right for your for this pasta. Okay, for this one we're doing. Okay, then those usually have a cutter attachment with them as well. So you can put that cutter attachment on there, flour that real good, and run your pasta through that cutter attachment. And then toss the cut pasta with a little bit of flour again. Okay, same goes with if you did it by hand. Once you cut the pasta, you want to toss it with a little flour again, because now you get those cut edges that have never been floured, right? Because they were in the middle of the pasta. Now they're cut and they're exposed. I'm going to flour those so it doesn't stick together. Okay. Don't worry about using too much flour. Any excess flour will come off in the boiling process. Okay. You'd rather have too much flour than not enough. You'd rather have your boiling water pot have too much extra flour sitting in the bottom than your pasta stuck together in one big lump. All right. So now once you get your pasta kneaded, rested, rolled, cut, it's time to cook it. Fresh pasta cooks completely differently than dried pasta. The only thing they share is that you're using salted boiled water. Okay? Dried pasta takes 6, 9, 12, 14 minutes, depending on which kind of pasta you're cooking, right? Takes a while, relatively. Fresh pasta, 60 to 90 seconds. That's it. Okay? That dried pasta has been dehydrated. It needs to be rehydrated, right? Your fresh pasta is still hydrated. It's already hydrated. It doesn't need to be rehydrated and then cooked. It just needs to be cooked, all right? So get yourself a nice pot of boiling water at a good ripping boil. Throw in a bunch of salt, right? My chefs always said salty as the sea. That's how salted your boiling pasta water should be. And then you're going to take that pasta and don't just dump the whole clump in there. Otherwise, it'll cook like a big clump. Pick it up and kind of sprinkle it into that boiling water. So it drops in and it, in individual pieces, right? Don't drop it in one at a time, but kind of sprinkle it all in there. Okay? Your water's going to stop boiling. Then it's going to start boiling again. At 60 seconds, you're done. Okay? Now, here's how I like to get the fresh pasta out of there. If you take that fresh pasta and you go dump it into a strainer, it's going to clump together again. All right? It's going to want to clump together. So instead of that, have your Alfredo sauce already ready, right? In the time it takes you to either rest your pasta or whatever, you can make that Alfredo sauce and have it sitting on the stove ready to go, okay? Or while you're waiting for your pasta water to come to a boil, make your Alfredo sauce. Like, it's that quick, okay? And then just have it sitting, ready, waiting. Cook your pasta 60 to 90 seconds. Get a pair of tongs. Grab that pasta, as much of it as you can, right? You just kind of let that water drip off and then go straight into that pan of Alfredo sauce. Okay? And then fish out the rest of those pastas, put them in that Alfredo sauce. If you get a little pasta water in your Alfredo sauce, that's totally fine, right? It's starchy from the flour and the pasta, and it's salty. It's going to season that Alfredo sauce, just make it even better. Okay? So don't sweat that. What's important is that these noodles get immediately sauced, okay? Don't take fresh pasta and put it on a plate and then put sauce on top of that, because what you'll have is sauce on top of a clump of noodles, okay? We did all this work, you guys. We spent all this time, right, making this beautiful pasta. We don't want it to be a clump of noodles. We want each one coated in that sauce, all right? So tongs right into the sauce, toss, 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 so each noodle's coated in sauce. And again, it's important that in Italian dishes with pasta, the pasta itself is the star, not the sauce. The sauce is really just there to keep the noodles from sticking together, y'all. Okay? Trust me, when you eat these fresh pasta noodles, you can be like, wow, that is so delicious. Okay? The sauce is really only there to keep them from sticking together. It's going to add some flavor, sure. It's going to add some mouthfeel, and that's all nice. It's going to add some richness. That's great. But really, it's there to keep those noodles from sticking together. All right? Toss, toss, toss with the sauce. Straight on the plate. Time to eat. Your guests, if you're feeding some people, need to be sitting at the table waiting for you to bring them a plate of this food. Okay? They don't, you don't like plate it up and then go find everybody and get them downstairs. Because by the time you get down there, it's going to be a big clump of noodles. All right? These go straight from the boiling water to the sauce to the plate into people's mouths. That's what the process should be with this fresh pasta. Okay?
Chef Luke, a question came up about if we don't, how do you keep the pasta from clumping if you don't sauce it right away? You don't cook it. You cut it, you roll it, you cut it, you dust it, you put it on a sheet tray, you wrap it up, and you put it in your fridge.
Yeah.
But you don't want to hold it for more than, again, 24 hours after cutting. If you're going to go through the process to make this, have your stuff ready to go and have it for dinner. Sit down and enjoy this meal. And yes, you can choose which sauce to toss it in. I
Sure.
don't mind which one. I mean, we say, I believe, fettuccine Alfredo, but if you're making both, or plate it up with both sauces, not a bad thing.
The Alfredo sauce to me makes sense because you can make it while you're waiting for your water to boil, right? If you've already made the tomato sauce and it's done and ready, put it in a skillet, warm it up a little bit, and have that ready to go. And then you could do the Alfredo sauce for something else. And that's totally fine. It just, most people want to go for that fettuccine Alfredo. But you know what? That fettuccine tomato, delicious as well.
I don't care which one you sauce it with, but you still have to make both sauces and pasta.
Yep.
You have to make all three items.
You gotta make all three items.
All three items. One narrative sheet, all three items.
Yeah, you'll notice this week you're going to be presenting 20 photos. And again, self-ID with the current week and current date, sanitizer bucket is in each one of these. So if you're doing it on separate days, we need a new ID and a new sanitizer bucket with new dates for each one. If you do your Alfredo and your pasta together, that one photo is okay. If you do all three in the same time, then that's okay. Right? If you sit down and really write down the steps to each of these, you could do all three of these in the same afternoon or evening. Right? I mean, it's start to finish, 3 hours probably, with resting time and eating time and simmering time on tomato sauce, right? All that kind of stuff. But if you sat down and write down the steps and think it out, you could plan these so you do them all in one go, in one afternoon or one evening. But you can also break them up into individual days. If you wanted to make your tomato sauce tomorrow and then bust it out on Saturday and warm it up to eat it with your pasta, that's fine. Right? Alfredo sauce, same thing. You can make that ahead of time if you want. I don't see why you would, because it literally takes less than 10 minutes to make the Alfredo sauce. So,
and then you have to be careful with it separating and breaking on the reheat. I would save yourself that fight.
There's a lot more opportunity for things to go sideways with the Alfredo sauce reheating than just making it from start to finish in 10 minutes. But remember, getting each of the required photos, filling out the narrative from start to finish is the best way to get the best grade. It's the only way to get the best grade, is by making sure you get all the required photos and you fill the narrative out completely each week. One narrative sheet talking about all three things you did. Each question on there, you can answer it for each of those three things that you did. Let's see.
And I really, really want to see pasta that's been tossed in sauce, please. Not, I see it in the block. It's the pot. It's the classic, Lady and the Tramp spaghetti picture with the noodles on the bottom and the sauce on the top. I don't want that. That's not going to be delicious. Or it is going to be delicious, but not as delicious as if you tossed it all together.
Needs this sauce, this pasta wants to be tossed in sauce. It does not want sauce poured on top of it. Matt So you might have to unmute yourself there, Matt. I don't think it'll let me do it. You there, Matt?
Yeah, it was an accident. Sorry.
Oh, okay, no problem. Happens all the time. And that's week 4, you guys. Again, it's some work. Again, like if you wanted to do all 3 of these start to finish, you're probably looking at 3, maybe 4 hours. Okay. So that's absolutely doable. You know, if you've got an afternoon or an evening available. At this point, I don't think we talked about this last week. I think we mentioned it in week 1, but we really are going to start harping on you guys to use your assignments as your meals at home. Okay. Don't think about this as a bunch of stuff you have to go buy on top of what you're already feeding yourself and your family. Okay. Because that's just more money and time. Okay. This should absolutely be meals you are feeding yourself and your friends or your family. Okay. Work it into this week's menu with whatever, lunch, dinner, breakfast, whatever. Okay. I can't tell you how much pasta I've eaten for breakfast in the kitchens. Okay. Work it into your regular menu for the week. That way you're not incurring extra cost and extra time on yourself. Don't make dinner for your family and then put the kids to bed and then go make fresh pasta, right? You missed an opportunity to share this experience with your family and also save some time and some money, right? You don't want to be up till 1 a.m. making fresh pasta just so that you take pictures of it and eat it yourself or throw it away, right? That's awful, right? Make it for the people that you're around. Invite some friends over, right? You want to start getting some feedback on what you're doing. I'm certain that some of you have friends going, how are you going to culinary school online? Come on now, right? Invite them over, say, let me show you how I'm going to culinary school online, right? And show them what you can do, okay? It's a great opportunity to do that. That's why we're all here. We love to feed people. You love to see the look on somebody's face when you make them something delicious, right? Take this opportunity. Take this opportunity to take these new and different techniques and see that smile on somebody's face when they put it together. And they'll go, okay, now I see how you go to culinary school online. It does work. All right. Okay? As always, if you have specific questions on your grades, on your assignments, please reach out to Chef Jackie. If you have questions about the program in general, the food service industry in general, food in general, or you want to talk to somebody about something, give me a call or a text or an email, right? If you need someone to speak to about some issues, you need some resources, reach out to your student success coach. If you have technical issues with your devices or our website, contact student support with that number at the very bottom of every page on the website. And if you're already starting to think about externship, I've had a few emails about externships. Reach out to the Career Services Department. Remember, in the Ask Your Questions here at the top of our page, one of those is career services and externship. Click on that. You can see who your rep is depending on where you live. Give them a call or an email and start talking to them about your externship. All right. Seems like it's forever away. Remember when we started and it was 13 months away? Now it's 12 months away. All right. So it's going to creep up on you before you know it. All right. Thank you guys so much.
I think
Yes.
Victoria has a question.
Okay.
She didn't get it up in the participants, but I see it in the chat.
Okay. What's up, Victoria?
Raising hand question.
Hi, I'm going to turn my video on for a second. Hi. All right, so I walked out when y'all were talking about the using the to find out the sauce for tomato, and I was wondering if this would be fine or one of these.
I would use the strainer. I don't think the sifter is going to push stuff through.
All right, so this one.
Yeah, I'd use that and use a spatula to push everything through there.
All right, that's what I was wanting to double check. Thank you.
You got it. And those are perfect questions to reach out with us with. Okay, if you're like, I'm not sure, send me a text, send me an email, give me a call. Same with Chef Jackie. She can answer all those questions for you as well. If you're like, I have this and I have this, take a picture and say, I have this and I have this. Which one do I use? And exactly like that, and we'll tell you which one to use. All right? But don't wait till Tuesday night to ask those questions, because then I'll say, I'll tell you yesterday.
If you're having technical glitches because the gremlins come out, you need to let us know ahead of time. It may not make a difference, honestly. If you tell me today that you couldn't submit your assignment yesterday, your assignment is still late today. If you told me on Sunday, my Wi-Fi is being funky, I've already called, my internet company, they're coming as soon as possible, then we might be able to work on it because you told me 2 days in advance. And hopefully the gremlins are worked out after 2 days. But they come out Tuesday night about 10 p.m. They don't go away till at least Wednesday morning usually, after I've put those zeros in. And I know nobody likes to see those zeros in there. Yes, they go away when you submit, but there is still that late point, Doc. So don't forget that. And then again, we say it every week, and I'm going to say it again, feedback. Watch it, especially if you look at your score and go, I don't like that number. My feedback will tell you where your issue lies. If it's a 93, I'm probably going to say you did a good job. There's a little something missing, and I'll tell you what it is, but I'm not looking for you to resubmit with a 93. If you want to, that's your choice, but I'm not expecting it there. If you have a 15, a 50, a 60, a 65, then you're missing a big component and you should resubmit.
Yeah, absolutely. Take that opportunity. All right. Thank you guys very much. We'll see you next week.